Fiance and stepson stole over $120,000 from my accounts to fund ex-wife's expensive lifestyle until she ditched them. Now they want back in my life. Before I tell you guys the situation, I want to add some background info. I am rich. I meet George, who has a young son named Manny. George told me how he loved his ex-wife Serena, but she cheated on him with another man. We dated and eventually got married. Serena reached out to George a few years ago saying how her new husband had ditched her for a younger model. George told me about it and I felt bad about her, but that's about it. George and Manny have cards to our joint savings account where mostly I deposit the maximum money since I earn 3x of George. Manny and I used to have a good relationship, but then out of nowhere he would get angry at me for no reason. He would taunt that he couldn't wait for his dad to leave me. This made me think and I got a bit suspicious. Checked my account statement, which I never do actually, and found out that fiance and stepson had scammed me out of $120,000 in total. At least I confront George and he refuses to admit, but I threaten legal action on him, and this is when he says he has been cheating on me with his ex-wife and basically funding her entire lifestyle with my money. I kick both of them out after finding this truth. Well, in just a week, I receive a call from George and Manny begging me to forgive them. I scoffed and asked him why is he calling me and not his mother. This is when they tell me how ex-wife left George and Manny after she realized that she couldn't take any more money from them. She didn't want to marry George again or have a family like George and Manny were dreaming about all along. I informed them that they have lost any and all chances to ever be a family again. Hey everyone, I never thought I would be sharing my story here, but recent events have left me feeling like I need to get this off my chest. So, here goes nothing. I was engaged to this guy named George, who I believe was the perfect man for me to marry. Turns out our engagement was a complete facade, and I have made the difficult decision to end it after just 3 months. Right now, I'm managing to keep it together, but I fear that once everything settles, I'll be overwhelmed by panic. You see, I come from a family with generational wealth and a background in entrepreneurship, which is why we all have very comfortable lives. However, this hasn't exactly been a boon for my romantic life. I have found that many men I have encountered have tried to take advantage of me or manipulate me to be with them for their own financial gain. While I'm not extravagantly wealthy, I do live comfortably. I met George during a social outing, and despite initially not being interested in anything beyond friendship, I was drawn to him because of his genuine affection and respect towards me. He slowly swept me off my feet with his charming smile and kindness. He had a young son named Manny 15M, who I adored from the get-go. George told me all about his ex-wife Serena, who had cheated on him and ran away with a wealthier guy. This had completely broken his heart since they were college sweethearts. I felt for the poor guy, you know? Our relationship blossomed quickly, and we enjoyed a fulfilling sex life and a generally positive dynamic. I genuinely believed I was in a loving and exciting partnership with him. I decided to finally open up to him about my family's wealth. Initially skeptical, he was taken aback when he decided to look up information about my family online. George became upset, feeling betrayed that I hadn't disclosed this aspect of my life earlier, accusing me of a lack of trust. I explained to him that many people in my past had pursued me for my family's wealth, which is why I was cautious about revealing it too soon in relationships. While he eventually grasped my perspective and seemed to accept it, looking back there were a few red flags, like when he would ask me to buy extravagant gifts for his son or ask me to pay for our luxurious vacations. He hated his job and would always complain about how much he hated working and joke saying how with the wealth I had, he could easily become a house husband. There were moments when he would make remarks insinuating that I had it easy and didn't understand the value of hard work. This deeply offended me because, despite the privileges my family provided, I had worked diligently to carve out my own path in my career, which allowed me to sustain myself independently without relying on my parents' financial support. Unfortunately, George had always failed to appreciate this aspect of my life, which in hindsight should have raised some concerns for me. When my parents finally met George, it was evident that they were less than impressed. Throughout the meeting, George seemed fixated on asking my parents about their assets and what they could potentially offer him, which immediately raised red flags for my family. Adding to their reservations, George didn't offer to contribute to the dinner bill, leaving my father with the impression that he might not be financially responsible or considerate enough to support me adequately. Moreover, my mother expressed concerns about George's past as a divorcee and his status as a father, cautioning me to tread carefully in our relationship given my lack of experience in motherhood. Unfortunately, I paid no heed to their warning as I was in love and thought that we could all be a family one day. During all this, I have to mention that I never really had an especially great relationship with Manny, even though I loved him and wanted him to accept me. He has always perceived that I'm attempting to take the place of his mom, even though it's a role I have never really aimed for or tried to fulfill. I have only wanted to be a responsible role model for him and tried to let our relationship develop on his terms since he was nearly an adult when we met, but he was not interested. Manny made it very clear that he had no desire to know me much or have any kind of relationship with me other than a friend. He told me that he would always be respectful towards me no matter what. I was okay with this and always felt like his resentment stemmed from the fact that he simply did not want his father to move on, and this is why he hated me. Despite my genuine efforts to extend help, there was never any positive change in our relationship. I have attempted various approaches, such as giving him gifts, discussing relatable topics, and sharing my own experiences from when I was his age, but nothing seemed to resonate with him and he would just be polite, but that's it. George would always tell me to be patient and would assure me that Manny would eventually come around. After George and his ex-wife's divorce, Manny would spend 4 days with his mother and 3 days with George. I felt sorry for the child since it must be hard to have divorced parents, so I understood his resentment towards me. As months passed and our relationship became stronger, George and I decided to take the next step and moved in together. This is when we opened a joint account together where I was depositing 40% of my salary while he was depositing 30% of his salary since he earned considerably less and also had to pay for childcare for Manny. Our joint account was used to take care of our expenses around the house, including date nights and vacations, while I kept money in my separate personal account also. Got engaged. For the engagement ring, he bought me this beautiful diamond ring saying how he had saved up money over the years. I honestly didn't care about the ring because, for me, wealth wasn't a prerequisite for marriage. I simply wanted someone who truly cared for me, but clearly, it was a prerequisite for him since he started to change once we were engaged. I never pried into his financial details because I understood that he wasn't particularly well off, and I didn't want to embarrass him. This is when my parents told me firmly that I needed to sign a prenup agreement. I got pissed at my dad saying how he could ever suggest something like this, but my dad insisted, saying that if George really loved me then he would have no problem signing the agreement. That night, I brought up the topic in front of George and joked about how my dad had serious trust issues. To my surprise, George jumped out of his seat and started asking me angrily if I was thinking about it. I was a bit taken aback and told him honestly that I was still thinking, but it was just a piece of document anyway which would make my parents trust him more. However, George started yelling, saying how I was insulting him for even bringing this up and that I should trust him if I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. I told him that I agreed with his point and I did trust him, but my inheritance comes from my parents and they needed this assurance to feel better, so he should have no problem agreeing to it. George yelled that he had researched what my family owned and that with the money we had, he could live a comfortable life without working for a single day. He started to say how I should not be so selfish and as my partner, I should fight for him with my parents and make them forget about the prenup. This pissed me off as it reminded me a lot about my past experiences, so I immediately made it clear to him that up until now I could have let the prenup go, but seeing his reactions, I won't proceed with the wedding until he signs the papers. His eyes widened in shock as I continued to say that I wouldn't relinquish control over my finances to anyone. While we would be paying for bills together through our joint account and I was even willing to offer support to him and Manny during tough times or emergencies, I wasn't interested in completely funding someone else's lifestyle. Past experiences have taught me to be cautious, so I made my intentions clear without any hesitation. George tried to argue with me, but when he saw that I wasn't budging, he begrudgingly agreed to my boundaries. He told me that he was ready to sign the prenup agreements in order to make me trust him and asked me to send him the papers so he could look it over. This made me happy, and in a few days, despite the initial tension, he eventually signed it without much resistance. My parents were also satisfied with this. Fast forward a few weeks, I noticed George would spend a lot of time in the washroom, which was quite unusual. I would hear the shower running for at least 40 to 45 minutes. This struck me as a bit odd, especially because he would always take his phone with him. During this time, George would always tell me how he was out of money or how he needed to cut down on expenses. He would frequently ask me to borrow some money, and being my partner, I never suspected any foul play. This continued to happen for a while. However, I noticed he had started buying new clothes and accessories more frequently, which didn't align with his claims of financial constraint. Additionally, he became more secretive about his phone, often guarding it closely and keeping it on silent mode most of the time. Also, Manny, who usually used to be this sweet kid, started acting out of character, being rude and disrespectful towards me. He started to blatantly ignore my presence even when I would try to have a conversation with him during dinner. Once, Manny wanted to eat pizza, so I ordered it for him, but somehow the delivery guy messed up the order and we got someone else order who had ordered a pineapple pizza. I immediately called and complained, and the restaurant offered to deliver us our order in some time. However, Manny got extremely pissed when he came downstairs, even though I told him that the delivery guy had messed up. He started telling me how I couldn't do one single thing right, which surprised me because this wasn't my fault in any way. Like I said, he was never this disrespectful, and these incidents continued to happen several times where he would act like I didn't exist, talk over me, or outright blame me. I just couldn't figure out what had gotten into him and thought maybe he was going through his rebellious teenage phase. The only time Manny would talk to me properly or pretend to be nice was when he would want something from me, like money for a school trip or to go out on a date. I would sometimes even give him my card so he could spend money comfortably on his girlfriend. One day, I asked my fiance if I could borrow his laptop for a conference call. As I opened his laptop, I noticed a Telegram tab open, and to my surprise, it was my fiance chatting with his ex-wife. I had seen her pictures before, so it was easy for me to recognize. They were exchanging "I love you" messages and sending selfies to each other throughout the day. I scrolled back through the conversation history and realized that this had been going on for a few weeks and he was sending her money. My heart was beating so fast and I had a sinking feeling in my stomach as I processed what I had discovered. Quietly, I took screenshots of the conversations and closed the laptop. I remained silent for the rest of the day, still in shock from what I had found. Later, when my fiancé had gone to bed, I carefully reviewed the conversations. It became apparent that he had reconnected with her around the same time we got engaged, when she had texted him first saying how her new guy had left her with nothing and she was now living in her parents' basement. She continued to write how she missed George and wished she could still be with him. Their messages had quickly turned inappropriate, with George admitting how he was still in love with her and they had decided to meet up also. Then a few days later, she had started complaining to him about how she hated meeting up with him at a hotel and she wished they could have their own private oasis. Reading this made me throw up, but what worried me was that George had agreed and told her how he would try to find an apartment that he could lease so they could meet up without being worried about being spotted in public. This sentence made me stop. I reread the sentence as a wave of shock and betrayal washed over me. As their messages continued, I noticed that she would constantly ask him for money and he was always ready to pay. She would then send him photos of her in lingerie saying how she shopped all these things and the money that he had sent her. This absolutely infuriated me, so I quietly got out of bed to open my laptop and checked on our joint account. And boy, was I in for a shock. Although there were no big transactions, there was a constant withdrawal of $4,000 every 2 days for the past couple of months. I then checked my account statement and found the same. I checked the timing and date of withdrawals from my account and found that a lot of these withdrawals had been done usually on the days when Manny had my card. I calculated all the withdrawals done and the total came to around $120,000. So I immediately went through the screenshot of George's messages again to try and find any more evidence. I then saw a message that his ex-wife had sent to George last week saying how Manny was so happy to see his parents back together and that this was a sign for them to be a family again. My eyes widened in shock as I finally realized that George and Manny had been swindling me out of $120,000, all behind my back. My hands are shaking as I'm writing this. I am at a loss for words. I am completely numb. I don't know what to do or what to say to him. Do I confront my fiance about this? Do I leave him or do I talk to him and then forgive him? I have invested so much time and energy into this relationship. I can't believe this has happened to me. Ida, if I leave my fiance after he and his kids scammed me out of $120,000? Update 1. First of all, thank you all so much for your words of support. I am sorry I couldn't answer every one of you, but I did read every single comment. My eyes are still swollen from crying all night. And for those calling me weak or a fool and making fun of me, I would like to say that I hope this doesn't happen to any of you, because the feeling of betrayal is hard to live with. I still don't understand how George and Manny could betray me this way. I haven't confronted George yet, and this morning, I acted like everything was normal, although he did see my swollen eyes and asked me if anything was wrong. I quickly told him that I was on my period, which is usually very painful, so hopefully he doesn't catch up to me. After he went to the office, I drove to my parents' place. At my parents' house, I mustered up the courage to tell them everything that had transpired. Their initial shock quickly turned into anger and concern for my well-being. My dad, usually calm and composed, was visibly furious at George's betrayal, and he told me how he had always suspected that he wasn't a good man. I guess I should have listened to my parents. He insisted that we needed to consult our family lawyer to explore our legal options and see what could be done to address the situation. We are also going to be hiring a private investigator to gather evidence of George's infidelity and deceit so that we can have concrete proof of his actions that would strengthen our case when it comes to pursuing any legal action against him. I know it's a daunting and emotionally taxing process, but I know I can't let George's betrayal go unanswered. He not only violated our engagement but also stole a significant amount of money from me, betraying my trust in the worst possible way. As difficult as it is, I'm determined to stand up for myself and seek justice for the pain and suffering he has caused. Update 2. Hello guys. So in the last few weeks, a lot of things have happened. First of all, the Pi has given us significant evidence through photographs and videos that George and his ex-wife are indeed meeting up and that George has rented a one-bedroom flat for her. She probably lives there because he visits her there frequently. Manny would also sometimes visit her with George as if they were one happy family. But what shocked me was that on some days, the Pi had caught photos of George's ex-wife with other men also when George wasn't around. This made me laugh at the irony, seeing as how George was cheating on me while she was cheating on George and clearly using him. She would also go out shopping regularly and clearly had a crazy shopping addiction with her multiple luxurious bags that she would come back holding. What angered me was that all of her lifestyle was basically funded by me. Since finding out about all this, I and my parents have been discussing the legal options and have concluded that the best possible action would be for me to confront George, tell him that his game is up, and threaten him with taking him to court, so hopefully he agrees to pay me back all the money and we can peacefully settle this out of court. However, if George refuses, we will go the legal way, and I know for a fact that my dad would love to go scorch earth on him. So yesterday, after dinner, I confronted George calmly about everything. His eyes widened in shock as he stammered to justify his actions, but I told him how I knew everything and I had pictures as well, so there was no point denying it. He looked at me dumbfounded. I then firmly told him that I knew he and Manny had taken a total of $120,000 from my account as well as our joint account, where I paid 60% of my entire salary to fund his ex-wife's lifestyle and even brought her an apartment to live in. His eyes flickered as he looked at me nervously while I continued to say how my parents and I were ready to legally sue him, but we would be willing to let this matter go only if he paid me back all the money. This seemed to anger George and he started saying how this was impossible for him and that I knew about his financial conditions. I remained calm and told him that if he didn't pay me back now, then I would make sure to bury him in court such that he would then be forced to spend all his money on hiring a lawyer to stay out of jail. He stared at me for some time and asked if I was serious, and I nodded, saying how my lawyer was ready to file the case and all I needed to do was give him a call. This seemed to scare him straight and he started to say how we could reach an agreement where he would pay me a fixed amount every month. I told him that my lawyer would be contacting me about it and he better sign the papers or he would see me in court. He nodded slowly. I then asked him to pack his bags and get out. George then asked me if I didn't want to ask him why he had cheated on me, and I told him that I honestly didn't care. I could see regret flashing across his face as he got up to pack his bags and leave. I will be honest, I felt so powerful at that moment watching him obey me after he knew that he had been caught red-handed. He left my house in some time and I was finally free. I haven't cried a single time since yesterday. I am glad that he cheated on me before we got married and I didn't have to waste any more time on him. I also sent a message to Manny since I did not get a chance to confront him about how I and George have broken up and that I know everything about what they have done. I told him how his dad has to spend the rest of his life paying me back to avoid going to jail, and I hope that he would learn from his lesson and be a better man than his dad. Manny has definitely read my message, but he hasn't dared to reply back. I hope this can be my last update regarding this, as I want to move on from this matter. Update 3. Well, I am back with a short but very interesting update. It's been 4 months since I logged into this account. Something happened today that I thought might interest some of you people who have been asking for an update, hence I am writing this. Guess who showed up at my door today? George and Manny. They looked disheveled standing at my doorstep. I was shocked to see them since I had blocked both of them since I wanted absolutely no communication with them. The last time I saw George was when he came to meet my lawyer to sign the agreement to pay me back every month. My dad had shouted at him for 10 minutes about how worthless and spineless of a man he was, while George quietly bore it since he deserved it honestly. George had been sending me regular paychecks every month as decided, but that was it. I had no other contact with him and didn't appreciate him showing up here out of the blue. Because I didn't know what their intentions were, I didn't want to open the door for them, but I had cameras, so I decided to talk to them through the mic. I asked them why they were here and warned them that if they had any ill intentions then I would call the police. George told me how they were here just to talk and that I had nothing to worry about. He begged me to let them in, but I refused firmly. Defeated, he then started to say how sorry he and Manny were for what they had done and they were here to beg me for a chance of forgiveness. I listened to him in disbelief as Manny joined in to say how he was wrong to think that his parents were perfect for each other and that it was actually me who was a better partner to his dad. I still didn't understand why or what they were doing here, so I informed them that I didn't need any sort of apology and that I had moved on, so I would appreciate it if they left. George pleaded, saying how I have no idea how these last 4 months had been for them, how he had found out that his ex-wife had cheated on him yet again, how his ex-wife, once she realized that he couldn't fund her lifestyle, had quickly broken off things with him. It seems like karma wasted no time and I couldn't help but scoff at their plight. They told me how all she wanted was a fat bank account and never wanted to be a family again. They continued to tell me that they wanted me back in their lives so we could all continue to be a happy family like we were before. I laughed hearing this and told them that they had lost any and all chances to have a normal family when they both decided to betray me. I told them firmly that I was done with their bullshit, so they needed to move on and try to scam someone else. George protested that they were not trying to scam me and that he would continue to pay me back all the money he had taken, but I asked him to just stop talking. I informed them clearly that I was done with this conversation and that I would be calling the police if they didn't leave. Manny apologized and told me that he just wanted to say how sorry he was. I told him while I appreciated that, I didn't want them both to ever come to my house again or I would get restraining orders. Slowly, George backed away and I watched both of them leave, their shoulders slumped in defeat. With a sense of relief, I realized just how far I had come in the last few months. I don't think I am the weak person I was anymore, and I will never allow anyone else to take advantage of me ever again.